when we come to understand what is Pramanyavada, it is very important for us to be well versed with Prama, Aprama, and Pramana. Why is it so? It is so because the entire foundation of Pramanyavada stands on these three pillars, that is Prama, Aprama, and Pramana. In the simplest terms, Pramanyavada is the theory of validity of knowledge, and its moot contention is whether validity of knowledge is dependent upon external conditions or not. In other words, we can say that whether what I claim to be a valid knowledge, in order to ascertain its validity, I need the help of external conditions, subsequent tests, or do I not need the need, or do I not have the need of external conditions or subsequent tests? So, coming to Prama, what is Prama? In the simplest terms, it is valid knowledge. Aprama means invalid knowledge. Aprama consists of error, doubt, and memory. Error obviously is invalid knowledge because it is not the complete representation of what is truth. Doubt also is invalid knowledge, as well as our memory is also invalid knowledge. What is pramana? Pramana means the medium through which one can get valid knowledge. That is prama. And many times where we make the mistake is that we often confuse aprama to be prama. That is where the need of pramana comes. And what is pramanyavada? Pramanyavada is the theory whether the knowledge uh, regarding what we have got through the pramana, whether it is dependent upon external conditions or not. When it comes to understanding Pramanyavada, there are two basic theories called Swataha Pramanyavada and Parataha Pramanyavada that come to our forefront. As I have already discussed, that Pramanyavada stands on the fact whether the valid knowledge is dependent upon external conditions or whether it is self-valid, intrinsically valid. From this comes the two theories, that is Swataha Pramanyavada and Parataha Pramanyavada. Swataha Pramanyavada stands for intrinsic validity of knowledge. That is, knowledge, in order to be valid, does not need to depend upon external conditions or subsequent tests. On the other hand, Parata Pramanyavada states that knowledge, in order to be valid, needs to have subsequent tests or external conditions that can ascertain its validity. Let us first look at Swata Pramanyavada of Mimamsa. The moot contention lies in the fact that validity means the certitude of truth. The Mimamsa philosophy asserts that all knowledge, except the action of remembering or memory, is valid in itself, for it itself certitudes its own truth, and neither depends on any other extraneous condition nor on any other knowledge for its validity. The very conditions which give rise to knowledge also give rise to its validity as well as to the belief in that validity. Validity of knowledge and knowledge of that validity arise together with that knowledge and from those very conditions which give rise to that knowledge. Neither validity nor belief in that validity is due to any external condition and neither requires any verification for anything else. The theory of self-validity of knowledge is advocated in these two aspects. If the necessary conditions which give rise to knowledge, example, absence of defects in the instruments of knowledge and absence of contradiction are present, knowledge arises, and it arises with a belief in its validity. The conditions which give rise to knowledge also give rise to its validity. Pramanyam swatah utpadyate. And this validity is known as soon as the knowledge has arisen. Pramanyam swatah jnayate cha. Further, there are four conditions apart from the basic two aspects that need to be fulfilled in order to ascertain whether a certain knowledge is valid or not. It is valid if it does not arise from defective causes. karana dosha rahita. It might happen, for instance, that a person who is affected with jaundice might think that everything around him is yellow in color. Why is it so? It is because of the defective sense organs. That is, there is some problem in the sense organs due to which the truth is being morphed up and it is not uh, properly understood or grasped by, perceived by the perceiver. The second condition is that it must be free from contradiction. It must be self-consistent and should not be set aside by subsequent knowledge. Badhaka jnana rahita. For instance, there is a theory which ascertains X to be the truth. There should not be a theory which is subsequently running or after that running which will claim that X is not the truth. Here, we must not only contain it or limit it to the fact that the knowledge must be there without any contradiction at that particular point of time, but also in the subsequent times, in the future generations also, it should not be contradicted. If it is contradicted, then it is not valid knowledge anymore. It is not valid knowledge. The only thing is that it was not understood or it was not known before. Here I can give the instance of the geocentric and the heliocentric viewpoints, where earlier there was a viewpoint that the earth is in the middle or is in the center of the universe and every other planet is revolving around it. This was claimed to be valid knowledge, but it is not, because there was a subsequent knowledge which came with a contradiction, that is, that it was found the earth is not in the center of the universe, rather, the sun is at the center of the universe. So the claim that the sun is at the center, so that the earth is at the center of the universe is thus contradicted and is not valid knowledge. Thirdly, valid knowledge must apprehension, we can say in other words, anubhuti. It must apprehend an object which has not already been apprehended. The novelty is an essential feature of knowledge, agrihita grahi. Thus, memory is excluded from valid knowledge by Prabhakara as well as Kumarila also. Fourthly, it must truly represent the object. It should not be that the claim or the knowledge statement that is claimed and the object in reality are having two different features or characteristics. The statement regarding the valid knowledge, that is the statement claiming that something is valid, must truly represent the object in reality. That is yathartha. When it comes to Swatah Pramanyavada, there are two prime advocates of this theory, who are the famous Mimamsa philosophers, Prabhakara and Kumarila. So now let us see on which points they agree and on which points there are differences. Prabhakara defines valid knowledge as apprehension or anubhuti. Once there is anubhuti, all apprehension is direct, immediate, and valid per se. Direct, because there is nothing, there is no hindrance in between. Immediate, because it is not so that there will be a particular gap between the apprehension, the contact of the sense organs with that object and the knowledge about the object. So a cognition which apprehends an object cannot be intrinsically invalid. If it is being apprehended, then it means it is valid knowledge. Memory arises from the impression of a prior cognition and therefore cannot be treated as valid knowledge. Prabhakara says the famous dictum, all cognitions as cognitions are valid. Their invalidity is due to their disagreement with the real nature of their objects. We must also understand that what Kumarila says. Kumarila defines valid knowledge as apprehension of an object which is produced by causes free from defects and which is not contradicted by subsequent knowledge. Let us not forget that just now we discussed about the four conditions, and that is what Kumarila is talking about. So he states that the validity of knowledge consists in its apprehending an object. It is set aside by such discrepancies as its disagreement with the real nature of the object. So, all knowledge, therefore, is presumably valid, and our normal life runs smooth on account of this belief. A need for explanation is felt only when knowledge fails to be valid and its invalidity is inferred either from some defect in the instrument of knowledge or from a subsequent contradicting knowledge. Adding to it, I would also state that in this context, all the four conditions are equally applicable. Now, let us take some examples through which we can understand this very clearly. There is problem or like knowledge itself is valid, but if the instruments of of the knowing knowledge, that is the way or the medium of knowing knowledge, is not correct, is not with defects, then there will be problem. For example, if a person suffering from jaundice sees a conch to be yellow, the knowledge of the yellow conch is invalidated on account of the defect in the organ of vision, that is, on account of the presence of the bile in the eye. So, here, if the person claims that the conch is yellow, then it is not true. Why is it not true? The truth is that the conch is white, but the problem lies in the instrument of knowledge. That is, in that there is defective cause. That is the presence of the bile in the eye. So another example is that if a rope is mistaken for a snake, the knowledge of the rope snake is invalidated by the subsequent knowledge of the rope. First of all, it is mistaken to be snake, but on later analysis and realization, one realizes that it is not a snake, rather it's a rope. That's why here the subsequent knowledge claims that the entity is a rope. That's why it cannot be proven that the entity in front of the person is a snake. Though the invalidity of knowledge is inferred, yet knowledge itself is intrinsically presumed to be valid. Its validity is not subject to inference. Truth is normal, error is abnormal. Belief is natural, disbelief is an exception. So, as I had already stated about the origination and ascertainment of knowledge, we can say that the Mimamsa advocates the self validity of knowledge both in respect of its origin, that is Utpatti, and ascertainment, that is Gyapti. The validity of knowledge arises together with that knowledge, and it is also known as soon as that knowledge is known. As we had already discussed, that validity, when it comes to validity of knowledge, it is direct, immediate, and valid per se, or valid in itself. Coming to Parata Pramanyavada of Nyaya, we can see that Parata Pramanyavada stands on the moot contention that knowledge, in order to be valid, is dependent upon external conditions or subsequent tests. That is, we cannot claim that knowledge, as with its utpatti and ascertainment itself, is valid. There is a need for further examination and further verification in order to claim that something is that is a knowledge claim is actually valid or not. It is true that under certain conditions, a piece of knowledge is produced in us. But what is meant by saying that this knowledge is a proof of its own truth? For instance, when we perceive anything as blue, it is the direct result of visual contact. And this visual contact cannot certify that the knowledge generated is true, as the visual contact is not in any touch with the knowledge. According to Nyaya Vaisheshika, both the validity and invalidity of knowledge are due to extraneous conditions. According to Nyaya, knowledge is neither valid nor invalid in itself, it is neutral. So, when we say that it is neutral, it means that there is a need of further testing or further verification, further examination, which can claim whether it is valid or invalid. The question of its validity or invalidity arises only after knowledge has arisen. The nature of knowledge is its correspondence with its object, and the test of truth is fruitful activity or samvadi pravriti. If knowledge leads to fruitful activity, it is valid. If it does not lead to fruitful activity, then it is invalid. Validity and invalidity are not intrinsically connected with knowledge. Rather, they are the result of a subsequent test. Validity is due to excellence or guna in the causes of knowledge, and invalidity is due to defect or dosha in the causes of knowledge. So we can say that knowledge arises simply as knowledge, and afterwards, after subsequent test, after further verification, it becomes either or invalid, either valid or invalid. What is it dependent upon? It is dependent upon the extraneous conditions. The Mimamsaka no doubt agrees with the Nyayika so far as the invalidity of knowledge is concerned, because both of them regard that invalidity of knowledge arises due to extraneous conditions. But uh, the Nyayika differs from the Mimamsaka on the point of valid knowledge. The Mimamsaka criticizes the Nyayika in regard to the validity or pramanya of knowledge. The Mimamsaka states that all knowledge is intrinsically valid. If the validity of knowledge also, like its invalidity, depends upon extraneous condition, then no knowledge would ever become valid. Why is it so? Because to prove no claim one to be valid, there needs to be another claim two which can support it. So to prove claim 2 be valid, there needs to be another claim 3 which can support its validity, which can be a proof of its validity. In this way, there will be an infinite regress, which is not possible to end. The Nyayika contends that knowledge arises simply as knowledge, that it is neutral, and that the question of its validity or invalidity arises afterwards and depends on external test. The Mimamsaka points out that the so called neutral knowledge is an impossibility. We always experience either valid knowledge or invalid knowledge, and there is no third alternative. We never experience neutral knowledge. To say that we experience neutral knowledge is to maintain the absurd position that knowledge, when it arises, is devoid of all logical value. Hence, neutral knowledge is no knowledge at all. Therefore, all knowledge must be either valid or invalid. We admit that the invalidity of knowledge is due to extraneous condition. For instance, due to some defect in the causes which produce knowledge or due to some contradiction. But the validity cannot be due to any sort of extraneous condition. So we can say that uh, according to Mimamsa, nothing can validate knowledge if knowledge is not self-valid. The presence of any excellence or guna in the causes of knowledge cannot make it valid, for no such excellence is known. There is no necessity of assuming any excellence in the causes of knowledge. Freedom from defect and contradiction is sufficient to account for the rise of valid knowledge. If the validity of knowledge is due to an external condition, like some excellence in causes of knowledge or correspondence or fruitful activity, then this knowledge of excellence or correspondence or fruitful activity would require a third knowledge to validate itself, as I already said, before it can validate the first knowledge, and so on ad infinitum. So, the fallacy of infinite regress cannot be avoided, since the knowledge of the external condition, which is said to validate any knowledge, being itself knowledge, would require another external condition to validate it. Hence, all knowledge must be regarded as self valid. The so called extraneous conditions like excellence or correspondence or fruitful activity are really neither extraneous nor near conditions. Excellence means only freedom from defect. Fruitful activity means absence of contradiction. We can say that correspondence means true representation of the object. Now, these things are the necessary conditions which give rise to valid knowledge. These are the essential prerequisites of any valid knowledge. In their absence, valid knowledge would not arise at all. They are internally and intimately connected with the causes which produce knowledge. Hence, they are neither extraneous nor mere conditions nor tests of the validity of knowledge. They are the essential and necessary causes which produce valid knowledge. These causes being present, knowledge would arise and it would arise together with its validity and the belief in that validity. We can say that the Mimamsa theory and the Nyaya theory are very much compared with many Western theories. The Nyaya theory of Paratah Pramanyavada and the Mimamsa theory of Swatah Pramanyavada are compared to the theory of correspondence and the theory of coherence in Western logic. According to Western realism, the nature and criterion of truth is correspondence with external reality, while according to Western idealism, it is coherence or self consistency. The theory of correspondence advocates that truth is a determinate and external relation between two distinct and independent things. It is a one-one relation between ultimately simple elements. Our knowledge, in order to be true, must correspond to the external reality as it is. The theory is criticized on the ground that a purely external relation is meaningless as well as impossible. If the terms related are conceived as ultimately simple and independent entities, then there can be no relation between them. The entities being independent, the relation cannot inhere in either or in both. And if the relation falls outside them both, then the relation itself becomes a third entity and needs another relation to relate it to the first two, and so on ad infinitum. Moreover, relation is possible only within a whole, and a mere juxtaposition of the so called atomic or independent entities does not constitute a real whole. Again, the external substance is unknown and unknowable. It is what Locke has said, a I know not what. Then how can we compare our knowledge with the unknowable substance? If we do not know the original, how can we even say that our knowledge is a copy of the real? How can we know that it corresponds to the real? Again, correspondence itself must exist for a mind which actively discovers truth and does not invent it. Thus, the so called correspondence becomes a subsequent experience, and when we say that our knowledge corresponds with reality, what we really mean is that our two experiences are consistent and do not contradict. Hence, correspondence glides away in coherence. The coherence theory is advocated by the idealists who believe that reality is a concrete identity in difference, a real whole which is immanent in all its diverse parts, which are organically related to it. Reality is the ultimate subject of all our judgments, and a judgment is defined as an ideal content referred to reality. Thought is neither an abstract identity nor a mere difference, but a diving process, a significant whole which is an identity in difference. It is self consistent and coherent. Reality is free from contradictions, not because it has annihilated them, but because it has overcome their antagonism in its harmonious bosom. And truth is the systematic coherence which is a characteristic of a significant whole. So, this theory is criticized on the ground that according to it, no truth is completely true. Because coherence, being in discursive judgments, fails of concurrent coherence, which is the absolute truth. Coherence may be the test of truth, but if it is regarded as the nature of truth, then no truth can be completely true. Coherence is mediacy, and if validity is mediate, then no cognition can be absolutely valid. The Nyaya theory may be compared to the theory of correspondence. The Nyaya advocates realistic pluralism and believes, like the Western realists, that correspondence with external reality is the nature of valid knowledge. But whereas the Western realists make correspondence also the test of truth, the Nyaya realizes the difficulty and falls back on an indirect test, that of consistent, samvadi, and fruitful activity or practical efficiency, artha kriya jnana. Here it accepts pragmatism. The Mimamsa rightly points out that fruitful activity really means freedom from contradiction. It is, as the Nyaya itself half heartedly admits, self consistency, samvada. The Mimamsa theory of Swatah Pramanyavada bears resemblance with the theory of coherence, but there are striking differences also. The coherence theory can be really advocated by idealism alone. The Mimamsa is a system of rank realism and beliefs like the Nyaya that every knowledge points to an external and independent object beyond it. It admits, like the Nyaya, that valid knowledge should truly represent the external object. That correspondence with the external object is the nature of valid knowledge. Yathartham Jnanam Pramanam. It also agrees with Nyaya in maintaining that invalidity is due to extraneous conditions. It only says that all knowledge is intrinsically valid. The conditions of freedom from defects and non contradiction being satisfied, all knowledge arises as self valid. Coherence and self consistency is the nature of valid knowledge. But this coherence of the Mimamsa is not a real coherence, which is a characteristic of a significant whole. Reality is not regarded as a concrete whole, but only a juxtaposition of the distinct independent atomic entities. The realism of the Mimamsa does not allow it to rise to real coherence and taking all knowledge as intrinsically valid. It simply dispenses with the need of finding out any test for it. But by accepting non contradiction as well as correspondence with the external object as the nature of truth, and further by accepting the view that cognition is immediate apprehension, the Mimamsa avoids the criticism leveled against the coherence theory. What another interesting fact regarding the theory of Pramanyavada is the influential philosophical and logical treatise written by the 14th century logician Gangesha Upadhyaya, that is Tattva Chintamani. In Tattva Chintamani also, what Gangesha does is that he presents a comprehensive analysis of the means of valid knowledge as pramanas. And he also talks about Pramanyavada. In this way, we can understand that the two main aspects of Pramanyavada stand on the moot contention whether valid knowledge is dependent upon external conditions or is it not. Mimamsa says that knowledge itself is valid. It is valid per se. Therefore, it does not need the help of external conditions. On the other hand, in Paratah Pramanyavada of Nyaya, it is said that knowledge, in order to be valid, needs the help of external conditions. On the point of invalidity, both of them agree that invalidity can be ascertained or claimed on the basis of external conditions. So these are the two main systems or the two main theories regarding Pramanyavada. But we should not, what I wanted to present here is the basic foundation of the Mimamsa theory and Nyaya theory of Pramanyavada. But we must not limit ourselves just to the Mimamsa and Nyaya theories of Pramanyavada. Rather, there are also other systems like Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta, Sankhya, who have also discussed about Pramanyavada. But the point which I wanted to make it clear for our students who are appearing for UGC NET and UGC NET JRF examinations is, what is Pramanyavada, what is the Nyaya contention of Pramanyavada, and what is the Mimamsa contention of Pramanyavada. With this very thank you. And if there are any questions, then I will love to respond to them. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Thank you very much, madam. You have almost completed the most of the systems of Indian philosophy on this particular topic. It is a very intricate topic also, and some of the students may have some issues with it. I will request them to raise any question or queries on this particular issue. It is ranging almost all the schools of Indian philosophy. So let me start with Payal. Payal is a professor of assistant professor of Murshidabad University, West Bengal. Payal, you start with some question. Payal Chattopadhyay.
Sir, actually, I was absent-minded. Actually, I was some work for do mobile phone.
Okay. So Anuradha Pandit. Sujoy. They have some internet issue.
Okay.
Internet connection. Anuradha, do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
What is your impression? Do you have any queries on this particular issue? Hello?
No, sir, I have no queries.
তুমি বাংলাতে বলতে পারো, ম্যাডাম বাংলা বোঝেন। হ্যাঁ, অসুবিধা নেই, ম্যাডাম বাংলা বোঝেন।
আসলে স্যার আমরা তো ইংলিশ শোনাতে এতটা অভ্যস্ত নই, তো একটু অসুবিধা ছিল। তো আস্তে আস্তে হয়ে যাবে এটা।
আচ্ছা, পৌলমী কিছু বলবে? পৌলমী গাঙ্গুলি। So if there is no, ঠিক আছে, okay. So actually the question you have emphasized mostly on Mimamsaka and the Nyaya school, isn't it? So I just want to have some idea on the Advaita school of Vedanta on this issue. Do you have any idea of that?
For example, the Advaita Vedanta school also talks about Pramanyavada, that is Sutta Pramanyavada, and it says that knowledge itself is valid. So in whatever contentions are there in the Mimamsa philosophy are almost similar to the Advaita Vedanta. But on the other hand, the Nyayikas have also attacked Advaita Vedanta on the same grounds as the Mimamsa philosophy.
আচ্ছা, ওকে। সৌমেন কুম্ভকার, তোমার কিছু বলার আছে? সৌমেন হাত তুলেছো? সৌমেন বাংলাতে বলতে পারো, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। সৌমেন।
হ্যাঁ স্যার, হ্যাঁ স্যার,
বলো।
হ্যাঁ স্যার, স্যার শোনা যাচ্ছে?
হ্যাঁ, শোনা যাচ্ছে, বলো।
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম, আমার প্রশ্নটা এই জায়গাতেই যে আমি ঠিকঠাকভাবে কিছুটা বুঝলাম, হয়তো কিছুটা বুঝলামও না। হ্যাঁ, আমার কোয়েশ্চেনটা হচ্ছে এই জায়গাতেই যে প্রামাণ্যবাদের যে মানে আসল কোয়েশ্চেনটা কি, মানে প্রামাণ্যবাদের দ্বারা আহ, যখন একটা বলা হচ্ছে যে মানে প্রামাণ্যবাদের দ্বারা জ্ঞানের যে প্রামাণ্য, তার যে প্রশ্ন, তো সেই মানে প্রশ্নটা আমি ঠিকঠাক বুঝতে পারিনি। I cannot understand the question of Pramanyavada, Mimamsa, or Nuyayika.
আচ্ছা।
That's a very good question and very foundational question also. Thing is, I can understand Bengali because I was born in Haldia, in West Bengal. But thing is, because of lack of practice, I am not very much well versed in speaking Bengali now. So main thing is that whether in order to ascertain something to be valid knowledge, we need some external tests, like it's some external proofs to validate it, or knowledge itself about an object is valid in itself. For example, I can say that grass is green. The Swata Pramanyavada philosophers will say that the fact that there is something called a grass and it is green means that there is no need of proving it further. But the Nyayika will further ask questions whether it is in reality green, whether there is some way, whether it is something else. So if the Swata Pramanyavadi says that when there is something called an object which is in itself present and we are able to experience it with the help of the pramanas, then we need not question it further whether it is in reality like that or whether it is not in reality like that. If grass is green and I'm able to experience that grass is green, then there is no need of further questioning whether it is so or not. It is because once there is utpatti of knowledge and there is gyapti, then there is no need of further or external verification or test. On the other hand, when we talk about Paratah Pramanyavada of Nyayika philosophers, what happens is that the basic claim is that knowledge is neutral. With its utpatti itself, with its origination itself, it cannot be claimed to be valid in itself. It means that whatever is claimed to be knowledge can further be questioned and tested and must be put to further verification. So that is the main contention or the main thing on which both the Swata, on which Pramanyavada stands. That is whether knowledge, in order to be valid, is valid in itself with its origin as well as ascertainment, that is Gyapti, or knowledge is dependent upon further test or verification. That is the main contention or the main issue, the main question with Swatah Pramanyavada or with Pramanyavada, and therefore the two different viewpoints, that is Swatah Pramanyavada and Paratah Pramanyavada, regarding Pramanyavada, they give two different viewpoints. So that is the main contention. Whether knowledge is in itself valid or in order to ascertain its validity, it depends upon some external conditions, some further testing, from some further proofs. That is the basic contention or the basic issue regarding Pramanyavada. That is whether knowledge is dependent upon external conditions to prove its validity, or knowledge is in itself valid. For example, I say that grass is green. Do I is the claim it's is grass is green itself it is valid, or do I need to further test whether grass is green? So this is a simple way of understanding this concept, but the main contention is whether knowledge is valid in itself or its validity is dependent upon some external conditions.
Okay,
Okay,
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
we can now. হ্যাঁ সোমেন ঠিক আছে? Is there anyone else to raise any
হ্যাঁ
question
হ্যাঁ স্যার
or any
একটা
clarification needed? Saurabh,
হ্যাঁ
yes.
হ্যাঁ স্যার ম্যাম
ও-
বলছিলাম
ওকে স্যার।
যে আমরা এই প্রামাণ্যবাদ নিয়ে বলতে গিয়ে একটা বিষয় আছে যে প্রকাশবাদের কথাটা। তো এই প্রসঙ্গে মীমাংসাকে অনুসরণ করলে যদি আমরা দেখি মানে মীমাংসা পার্সপেক্টিভে, তো প্রকাশবাদের সঙ্গে প্রামাণ্যবাদের রিলেশনটা যদি একটু বলেন, বা এর মধ্যে কোনো সম্পর্ক আছে কি নেই আদৌ, বা বিষয়টা কি সম্পূর্ণ আলাদা, মানে ভিউ মানে ডিফারেন্স ভিউ নাকি সিমিলারিটি আছে?
Yeah, it's a
Can
good
we
question. Yes.
just
Yes.
translate it in English, because I'm just having little understanding.
Because how Prakashavad is related to Pramanyavada. Prakashavad.
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
Prakashavad, I'm not well versed in that, so I cannot. Is there any like English connotation or
Achha.
the meaning of
That
it?
is Shata Prakasha, Parata Prakasha. This type of almost the same type of language that is parallel to Pramanyavada.
Ma'am,
There is a
is
question of how
called
the knowledge is expressed.
knowledge of knowledge.
Excuse me, can you just
পায়েল
clarify
একটু
a little
বুঝিয়ে বলে
bit
দাও তো।
more?
পায়েল একটু
স্যার,
বুঝিয়ে বলো ম্যাডামকে।
আমি আমি বলবো ব্যাপারটা একটু।
হ্যাঁ বলো বলো পায়েল।
হ্যাঁ, বলছি যে প্রকাশবাদ আর প্রামাণ্যবাদের ব্যাপারটা, স্যার আমি উত্তরটা একটু বলার চেষ্টা করবো কি?
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, ওকে, নো
আচ্ছা,
প্রবলেম।
হুম, যদি প্রকাশবাদের কথা ব্যাপারটা ভাবি, তাহলে বিষয়টা এরকম ভাবে হবে যে যখন একটা জ্ঞান উৎপন্ন হয়, সেই জ্ঞানটা উৎপত্তির সঙ্গে সঙ্গে প্রকাশিত হয়ে যায়, নাকি তার কাজটা কেবলমাত্র বিষয়কে প্রকাশ করেই সে ক্ষান্ত থাকে। মানে যখন আমার জ্ঞান হচ্ছে এটি ঘট, তখন সে কি করছে, সে ঘটটিকে প্রকাশ করছে, সঙ্গে সঙ্গে কি সে নিজেকে প্রকাশ করছে নাকি করছে না, এই বিষয়টা নিয়ে প্রশ্ন। তো যারা প্রকাশবাদী, তারা বলবে যে জ্ঞান বিষয় প্রকাশের সঙ্গে সঙ্গে নিজেকেও প্রকাশ করে। এই শতপ্রকাশবাদী কারা? তারা হচ্ছে প্রাভাকরগণ। প্রাভাকরগণ বলবেন যে জ্ঞান কেবল বিষয়ই প্রকাশ করে না, সঙ্গে সঙ্গে নিজেকেও প্রকাশ করে দেয়। এরা বিষয়টাকে প্রদীপের সঙ্গে তুলনা করে। প্রদীপ যেমন বিষয় প্রকাশ করার সঙ্গে সঙ্গে নিজেকেও প্রকাশ করে, জ্ঞানও তেমনি বিষয় প্রকাশ করে, সঙ্গে সঙ্গে নিজেকেও প্রকাশ করে। যারা পরত প্রকাশবাদী, যেমন ভাট্ট মীমাংসক এবং নৈয়ায়িক, তারা বলবে জ্ঞানের কাজ কেবলমাত্র বিষয় প্রকাশ করা, কিন্তু নিজেকে তারা প্রকাশ করতে পারে না। নিজে প্রকাশ হবে কি করে? যদি নৈয়ায়িক মত অনুসরণ করি, তাহলে বলবো যে জ্ঞান ব্যবসায় জ্ঞানের দ্বারা বিষয়কে প্রকাশ করছে, অনুব্যবসায় নামক একটি মানুষ প্রত্যক্ষ জন্মাচ্ছে, তার পরবর্তী পর্যায়ে সেই অনুব্যবসায়ের দ্বারা সে নিজেকে প্রকাশ করছে। এই অনুব্যবসায়টা একটি মানুষ প্রত্যক্ষ। হ্যাঁ, যেমন প্রথম জ্ঞানের আকারটা কি হচ্ছে? জ্ঞানের আকার হলো এটি ঘট। দ্বিতীয় পর্যায়ে জ্ঞানের আকার কি হলো? ঘট অহং জানামি, আমি ঘটটিকে জেনেছি। এই যে জানামি, এর দ্বারা কি হচ্ছে? যে জেনেছি, এটা এর ফলে জ্ঞানত্ব জাতির জ্ঞান হয়ে যাচ্ছে। কেন না, এই যে অনুগত প্রতীতি একটা উৎপন্ন হচ্ছে, আমি এটাকে জেনেছি, আমি একে জেনেছি, এইভাবে জ্ঞানের মধ্যে, বিভিন্ন জ্ঞানের মধ্যে আছে যে জ্ঞানত্ব জাতি, সেই জাতিকে জানছি। কেন না এই অনুগত প্রতীতির অনুরোধে একটি অনুগত ধর্ম স্বীকার করতে হয়, সেই অনুগত ধর্মই হলো জাতি। ঠিক আছে? তো এটা হচ্ছে, এরা বলবে, নৈয়ায়িকরা বলবে তাহলে জ্ঞানকে জানছি কিভাবে না, অনুব্যবসায়ের দ্বারা। ব্যবসায় জ্ঞানে বিষয় প্রকাশ হয়, অনুব্যবসায়ের দ্বারা জ্ঞানত্ব জাতির প্রকাশ হয়, এবং তারই মাধ্যমে জ্ঞানকেও আমরা জানতে পারছি। কিন্তু ভাট্টমীমাংসক বলবে যে না, আমরা যেভাবে পরবর্তী জ্ঞানটিকে মানে জ্ঞানের জ্ঞান হচ্ছে কিভাবে, না জ্ঞাততালিঙ্গক অনুমিতির দ্বারা। আচ্ছা, এখন প্রামাণ্যবাদ প্রসঙ্গে যেটা আসছে সেটা হচ্ছে যে জ্ঞানের প্রামাণ্যের জ্ঞান কি করে হবে। প্রামাণ্য শব্দটা কি করে আসছে, তাহলে প্রপূর্বক মা ধাতুর উত্তর ভাব বাচ্চে লুট প্রত্যয় যোগ করে আসছে। যদি করণ বাচ্চে লুট প্রত্যয় যোগ হয় তাহলে সেটা হয়ে যাবে প্রমাণ, কিন্তু ভাব বাচ্চে লুট প্রত্যয় যোগ হলে সেটা হবে প্রামাণ্য। অর্থাৎ জ্ঞানের মধ্যে আছে যে প্রমা জ্ঞানের মধ্যে আছে যে ধর্ম, প্রামাণ্য ধর্ম, সেটাই হচ্ছে, সেই ধর্মটি হচ্ছে প্রামাণ্য ধর্ম। আর অপ্রমা জ্ঞানের মধ্যে থাকে অপ্রামাণ্য ধর্ম। ম্যাম বলেছেন এই বিষয়গুলো সম্পর্কে। আচ্ছা, এবার প্রামাণ্য আর প্রকাশবাদের কথা যদি বলি তাহলে দেখব যে প্রাভাকর, সাংখ্য, যোগ দার্শনিকগণ, বেদান্তিগণ এরা প্রামাণ্যবাদ সম্পর্কে শতপ্রামাণ্যবাদী, প্রকাশবাদ সম্পর্কে এরা শতপ্রকাশবাদী। বৌদ্ধদের মত যদি দেখি তাহলে দেখব প্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে এরা পরত প্রামাণ্যবাদ স্বীকার করবে, এবং প্রকাশবাদ সম্পর্কে শতপ্রকাশবাদ স্বীকার করবে। আচ্ছা, এবার ভাট্ট আর মিশ্র মীমাংসক এদের কথা যদি দেখি তাহলে এরা প্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে বলবে যে জ্ঞানের প্রামাণ্য শতই প্রকাশিত হয়। এবং প্রকাশবাদের সম্পর্কে যদি বলি তাহলে বলবো যে এরা বলবে পরত প্রকাশবাদী হয়ে যাচ্ছে এরা। আর নৈয়ায়িকদের কথা যদি দেখি তাহলে প্রামাণ্যবাদ সম্পর্কে ওরা পরত প্রামাণ্যবাদী, প্রকাশবাদ সম্পর্কে ওরা পরত প্রকাশবাদী। হয়েছে। আর যদি অপ্রামাণ্যের কথা ভাবি তাহলে দেখব সাংখ্যাচার্য যারা, তারা প্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে শতস্থ কথা বলেন, শতই প্রামাণ্যের জ্ঞান হয়, আর অপ্রামাণ্য সেটাও শতই উৎপন্ন হয়, শতই জ্ঞাত হয়। আচ্ছা, আর নৈয়ায়িকদের কথা যদি ভাবি তাহলে ওরা প্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে পরত প্রামাণ্যবাদী, অপ্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কেও পরত অপ্রামাণ্যবাদী। বৌদ্ধদের কথা যদি ভাবি তাহলে বৌদ্ধরা প্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে পরত প্রামাণ্যবাদী, আর অপ্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে শত, অপ্রামাণ্যের শতস্থ স্বীকার করবে বৌদ্ধগণ। আর মীমাংসাচার্যদের কথা যদি ভাবি প্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে এরা শতস্থ মতবাদী, আর অপ্রামাণ্য সম্পর্কে পরত অপ্রামাণ্যবাদী। আর কিছু?
হ্যাঁ, মোটামুটি তো বোঝা গেল। সবই তোমাদের প্রত্যেকটা সিস্টেমকে আলাদা করে করে একটু নোট করে নিই। ইউ হ্যাভ টু নোট ডাউন all these issues. Whenever you read a particular school, and every school has something new on this issue, so you have to chalk out all the schools and get a chart of it so that you can remember all these things. থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। কালকেও ধন্যবাদ। আমরা তাহলে আজকে এখানেই শেষ করব। আশা করি পরবর্তী পর্যায়ে ম্যাডামকে আমরা পাবো অন্যান্য বিভিন্ন ইস্যুতে। থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ ম্যাডাম। থ্যাংক ইউ। গুড নাইট। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let us recording. Stop recording.